One of the more unique and interesting aspects of Sydney's rail network are the trains themselves. Sydney's quite extensive suburban rail network often gets a lot of attention for its use of double-decker trains. People from around the world find them pretty interesting, even people who aren't overly interested in trains. You'll see people who've travelled to Sydney making TikToks about them, and every now and then a post about Sydney's unique train design will hit the front page of Reddit. Now, double-decker trains may not be as common as single-deck ones, but they do exist all over the world, often on longer-distance commuter services. Chicago's Metro, for example, uses them, as do a few lines on Paris's RER. But I think what makes the Sydney double-deckers stand out to people is that A, all the trains on the network are double-decker, B, these double-decker trains run through the underground metro-like city circle beneath the city centre, and of course, C, the reversible seats. But despite all of this, Sydney's recently opened Metro Northwest project, which I have a video on if you want to know more about, there'll be a link somewhere on the screen, has chosen to do away with the double-decker trains, in favour of the more standard single-level ones. And the other proposed extensions of Sydney's rail network focus on these new single-level metro trains rather than the old double-decker network. So in this video, I want to see if double-decker trains are actually beneficial to Sydney's rail network, and if it's worth the city investing further in them in the future. But before we get to all of that, I think it's worth taking a quick look at why double-decker trains were introduced in the first place. Sydney didn't always run double-decker trains on its suburban network. The iconic Red Rattlers were single-deck trains that ran on the network until the 1990s. But in the 1960s, the first double-deckers started to join the fleet with the Tulloch double-deck carriages, and from then on, all of Sydney's future trains were double-deckers. One of the reasons Sydney was able to make the switch to double-decker trains while many other cities around the world weren't, is that the Sydney rail network was built in such a way that could accommodate larger trains. Bridges were generally high enough, and tunnels running underneath the city centre were built for large steam engines, so could accommodate the larger double-deckers as well. When Melbourne had its attempt at double-decker trains in the 1990s, one of the issues faced by the trains was that there were a lot of places on the network that the trains simply would not be able to fit through, and the cost of upgrading the infrastructure to let them fit was deemed too expensive. But given Sydney did switch to double-deckers and other cities like Melbourne have tried, they must come with some sort of benefit. And of course, the benefit is as you would expect, greater capacity. The additional floor means additional seats and places to stand. In fact, when Melbourne was trying to introduce its double-decker train, it was estimated that its capacity would be about 30% greater than its existing single-deck trains of similar length. So given lack of capacity is already a bit of an issue for Sydney's rail network, why would we want to move away from double-decker trains? Well, they aren't without a few drawbacks of their own. Firstly, they're very big, and that also means they're very heavy. And heavier trains take a longer time to accelerate up to speed, making the trains altogether a bit slow, especially when they need to stop frequently or slow down as they go into curves. If we compare the acceleration speed of the London Underground's 2009 stock with the Sydney train's A set, we can see that the smaller and lighter tube train can accelerate about 50% faster than Sydney's train. Now, weight isn't the only factor here, but it is still a significant one. Another drawback of Sydney's double-deckers is that they need to be custom designed just for Sydney. As I mentioned, they're fairly unique trains, and you can't just pick them out of a catalogue. This means specialised design and manufacturing capabilities are needed to build them, making them a bit more expensive. In contrast, the single-deck trains Sydney Metro uses are just a variant of Alstom's fairly widely used Metropolis line of metro trains, that are already manufactured for cities across the world, from Singapore to Montreal to Amsterdam. But perhaps the most significant drawback is also related to capacity. Yes, double-decker trains can help increase capacity as there's literally more space in the train to fit people, but they can also hinder it. A typical double-decker train can only fit 2 doors per carriage, as between the doors the carriage splits into its 2 levels. Only having 2 doors limits how fast people can alight and board the train, especially when you consider each door has to serve 2 floors of people. In contrast, single-deck trains have less design constraints, and can theoretically have as many doors per carriage as you want. On many metro systems where the goal is to get people on and off the trains quickly, like the London Underground for example, some trains have as many as 4 doors per carriage. This means that trains have to spend significantly less time sitting at the station waiting for passengers to alight and board, meaning trains can run more frequently, and more frequent trains means higher capacity. The London Underground's Victoria line can have a new train entering a station every 100 seconds during peak periods, while Sydney's trains are stuck with maximum frequencies closer to every 2 to 3 minutes. But is the lower maximum frequency enough to make the other additional capacity brought by double-decker trains not worth it? Well, it is a tough call to make. But when the ABC's fact-check team looked into it, they did find that despite the lower frequencies, double-decker trains were still able to carry at least slightly more people than their single-deck equivalents. They found that with improved signalling, the double-decker train lines could move a maximum of 33,000 people per hour, compared to 29,000 for single-deck trains. So, given all of this, should Sydney keep going with its double-decker trains? I think yes. Overcrowding can be an issue on the network, and the double-deckers do provide a boost to capacity, even if only a relatively small one. They're also just more appropriate for the kinds of journeys people use Sydney's trains for. A lot of these journeys are quite long, with people travelling far distances to get off in the Sydney Central Business District. The additional seating capacity lets these people make these journeys in comfort. Yes, smaller trains with more doors and more standing room could allow people to alight and board the trains quicker, but those sorts of trains are better suited for people making quick journeys within dense inner cities, not for people making long journeys all the way from the outer suburbs into the city centre. With that said, I do understand why Sydney is using single-deck trains for its newer metro lines. As these lines are mostly underground, money can be saved by boring the smaller tunnels allowed for by the smaller single-deck trains. Ultimately, Sydney's double-decker trains are iconic and shouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. They serve an important role in the network and bring significant enough benefits that I think they're definitely worth keeping around. Well, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. I also want to give a shout out to the channel Sydney Trains Vlogs. A fair bit of the background footage in this video was sourced from that channel, so if you liked it, go check them out. I'll put a link to the channel in the description. I'd also like to hear what you guys think about the double versus single deck train debate. Do you think there's much value in sticking with the double deckers? And as always, I'm City Moose, thanks for watching.